There were two guys in neon vests hammering stakes into my backyard and stringing caution tape across my fence line, like they were setting up for a crime scene or something. One of them smiled at me and said, "Don't worry, it's just the new public trail." I hadn't heard a damn word about any trail. I never thought I'd end up in a fight with my HOA. Hell, I barely knew the names of the people on the board when we moved in. I wasn't one of those neighborhood guys who shows up to every meeting with a clipboard and a fresh pot of grievances. I was just a guy who finally saved up enough to get his family out of the chaos of Charlotte and into someplace quieter, greener, safer. When we first saw the house, Lisa cried. Not big, dramatic tears, just one or two that snuck out while she was trying to play it cool. It was the yard that did it. The back of the property stretched way out, long and private, with this little cluster of old pines on the edge that the realtor said was technically HOA land, but no one ever touched it. It felt like the kind of place where you could breathe deep and finally exhale after years of holding it in. We put in an offer the same day. That yard became everything to us. Lisa would bring her grading out there in the evenings, stretch out on the hammock with a glass of white wine and a pen stuck in her hair. Our daughter Emma, she was maybe 8 back then, built fairy houses under those trees, little moss and pebble things full of imagination. I put up a swing for her, just between two of the sturdier pines. She used to sit out there for hours sketching whatever popped into her head. It became her little sanctuary. Cooper, our golden retriever, patrolled that yard like he was guarding Buckingham Palace. He's 12 now, limps a bit, but back then he'd chase squirrels from fence to fence and bark at the shadows. We buried his favorite tennis ball out there after it split in two. Silly maybe, but it felt right. It was quiet, peaceful. The kind of place where the loudest sound at night was crickets or the occasional owl. No sirens, no helicopters, no idiot neighbors revving their trucks at midnight. Just our home. Our space. The HOA? At first, they were just background noise. You know, the usual "don't paint your mailbox fuchsia" kind of stuff. Nothing crazy. They sent newsletters with cheesy clip art and reminded us not to park on the street overnight. I barely skimmed them. Lisa would roll her eyes and toss them in the recycling. We paid our dues, kept our grass trimmed, waved at the occasional board member. That was the extent of our involvement. Things didn't really start to shift until they brought in Chuck Merriweather. He came on as the new HOA president about a year and a half ago. Big guy, always in polos with that smug little embroidered HOA crest on the chest. Former real estate lawyer, I think. You could tell from the second he opened his mouth that he liked the sound of his own voice. He started pushing all these modernization initiatives. Some of them harmless, others not so much. Lisa called him HOA Napoleon. I told her not to poke the bear, but she just laughed and said, "Bears don't draft bylaws, Matt. Lawyers do." At the time, I didn't pay much attention. I was too busy trying to keep my small business alive, Colburn Electric. Nothing fancy, just me, a couple of guys I trust, and a truck with a faded logo. We mostly do residential jobs, fixing wiring, updating panels, installing light fixtures for folks too nervous to touch a breaker. Work slowed down during the winter, like it always does, and picked up again when the weather got nicer. Emma had just started high school. It was a rough transition for her. She's got some anxiety stuff we've been working through with her therapist, and the idea of new kids, new hallways, new everything, it hit her hard. That backyard was her lifeline. She'd sit out there with her headphones, sketchpad balanced on her knees, just zoning out. Sometimes I'd peek through the window and see her smiling to herself, completely in her own world. It meant the world to us that she had that space. Her space. And that's why when those guys showed up with their caution tape and started planting stakes along the fence line, it hit like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about the land, it was about the life we'd built on it. The memories, the quiet, the routines we'd grown to rely on. I didn't know it then, but that yellow tape was the first crack in everything. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me, standing in front of our mailbox, flipping through that month's HOA newsletter. The one with the same ugly clip art banner as always. Trees, houses, an eagle for some reason. I was halfway through zoning out when something caught my eye. A tiny paragraph tucked between a reminder about garbage bins and some blurb about pool wristbands. It said, "Preliminary work for a community trail initiative has been approved by the board. Project coordination with the village of Marvin is ongoing. Details to come." No map, no explanation, no heads up. Just that one little line, barely bigger than the fine print on a cereal box. I brought it inside, set it down on the kitchen island, and pointed to it while Lisa was making tea. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I asked. She leaned over, read it, and frowned. "Trail? We didn't vote on any trail." "Exactly," I said. "I haven't heard a damn thing about a trail, have you?" She shook her head. "I didn't even know they were talking to the village. Was there a meeting? If there was, we hadn't been invited, so I checked the HOA website, which looked like it hadn't been updated since dial-up. And nothing. No agenda, no minutes from a meeting, no trail talk. Just a login portal that never worked on the first try and some outdated landscaping tips. I ended up calling Greg, a guy 2 streets over I'd done some electrical work for last year. He used to be on the board before Chuck showed up and politely encouraged half of them to step down. Greg told me there was a board meeting a few weeks back, but it was private, whatever that means, and held at the clubhouse, middle of the day, no general notice, no signs, no emails. Chuck said it was just to discuss budget reallocations, Greg said, lowering his voice like someone might be listening. Didn't sound like anything major at the time. Budget reallocations my ass, I muttered. It didn't sit right, not one bit, the way they just slipped it in there like it was no big deal, like we wouldn't notice, like it wasn't worth our input. A week later, I drove past the clubhouse after picking up a part from the supply store, and there it was, a cheap little sandwich board out front that read, Community Trail Project, Phase 1 approved, with some awful word art arrow pointing toward a QR code. I scanned it. The link took me to a PDF, 5 pages long, filled with bureaucratic gibberish and stock photos of smiling families on trails that looked like they belonged in Colorado, not our neighborhood. And on page 4, buried under all the fluff, Colin was a line that chilled me. Projected easement path to utilize existing HOA common area easements for maximum connectivity and minimal disruption to private lots. Minimal disruption. That was rich. I printed it out and took a highlighter to the map. You had to squint to see it, but sure enough, there it was. A thin dotted line snaking straight through the strip of trees behind my house. The pines, Emma's swing, Cooper's turf are quiet. I stared at it for a long time, then pinned it to our fridge with a magnet shaped like a banana, of all things. Lisa walked in, looked at it, then at me. Tell me that's not what I think it is. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. That was the moment it clicked. The first real crack in the glass. They weren't just considering a trail, they were already treating it like a done deal. And they were doing it quietly, without asking the people who lived here, paid dues here, built lives here. It wasn't much. Just a line on a map and a few weasel words in a newsletter. But it felt like someone was slipping into our house while we were sleeping and rearranging the furniture. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it wouldn't go anywhere. Maybe Chuck was just doing his usual posturing for another feather in his little HOA cap. But somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. This wasn't the end of something. This was just the beginning. I don't know what exactly I expected to happen after that map landed on my fridge. Maybe I thought I'd see some updates. A town hall meeting, an email blast. Hell, even a flyer on a light pole. Something to tell us what was coming. What I didn't expect was to wake up one morning, look out my kitchen window while making eggs, and see a guy in a hard hat standing at the edge of our yard, holding a tablet and talking into a radio. Another guy was pounding a stake into the ground, right where Cooper usually lays in the sun. There were already 4 or 5 of those thin wooden markers lined up in the grass, bright pink flags fluttering like they were celebrating something. I threw on whatever shoes were closest, still in my pajama pants, and walked out there, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, can I help you? The one with the tablet looked up, gave me a polite little nod like I was a tourist asking for directions. Just marking the trail route, sir, all in the plans. What plans? He paused just a little too long. The Marvin Greenway project. We were told this section's cleared, part of the approved easement. I remember just staring at him, that word bouncing around in my head. Easement, like it was some magic spell that made my yard not my yard anymore. Who told you that? Did I asked. We're contracted through the beer at the village. You can talk to the HOA if you've got questions. Then he went right back to tapping on his tablet, like I wasn't even there. Lisa came out behind me, barefoot and quiet. She didn't say anything, just stood next to me with her arms crossed, staring at the flags. The swing Emma used to use creaked a little in the breeze. It was just sitting there, a few feet from where they'd planted one of the markers, flapping pink like some damn surrender flag. That night, Emma locked her bedroom window. She never does that. Said she saw one of the survey guys looking toward her room while he was on the phone. I doubt it meant anything, but that didn't matter. What mattered was how it made her feel. Unsafe. Watched. She stopped going out to sketch. That space she loved? It didn't feel like hers anymore. I called Chuck Merriweather that night, left a message. Then another the next day, then an email, then another one, no response. I wasn't the only one asking questions. I ran into Gina Reynolds at the grocery store. She lives a couple streets down, used to be on the HOA finance committee before Chuck pushed her out. She said she'd asked the board for a copy of the easement agreement and they told her it was in progress, but legally sufficient. Whatever the hell that means. The stakes stayed in our yard for weeks. More showed up. Then came the caution tape. bright yellow, strung low between the flags like some kind of crime scene. Emma actually cried when she saw it. Just this quiet, tired sort of cry, like something had been taken from her that she didn't know how to fight for. I went back to the HOA website. Nothing. Still no posted minutes from the meeting, no map, no schedule, just a glossy banner about progress and connectivity, and other words people like Chuck love to toss around to make steamrolling feel like service. Then came the letter. It showed up in a plain envelope, typed in the same sterile language all HOA letters seem to use. Notice of interference. Apparently, I'd been seen obstructing contracted municipal work, and was advised to refrain from further disruption under penalty of covenant violation. Covenant violation. For walking into my own damn yard and asking a question. Lisa read it 3 times, then put it down on the table like it was toxic. Are they serious? Oh, they're serious, I said. Dead serious. I sent an email to the HOA demanding a copy of the actual easement paperwork. Got an automated reply, your message has been received and will be reviewed by the board. Nothing since. Cooper, poor guy, got tangled up in that caution tape one day chasing a squirrel, knocked over one of the flags, and yelped so loud I thought he broke something. The tape wrapped around his back leg, and I had to cut it off with a pocket knife. That night, Lisa posted a photo of the flag on the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "This is what minimal disruption looks like." It blew up. People started commenting. Some had no idea a trail was even happening. Others said they'd heard something vague, but nothing specific. A few tried to defend the project, called us selfish, accused us of blocking progress, but the more people saw the tape and the flags, the more they started to get it. Then one morning, I found a bright orange notice pinned to the little pine near our swing set. Laminated, HOA letterhead. It said, "Do not remove. Municipal easement pathway identified." That pine? It was the one where Emma buried her time capsule 2 years ago. We used an old lunchbox. She filled it with sketches and a note to her future self. I stood there, looking at that sign flapping in the wind, and I swear something inside me cracked. They weren't just pushing a trail through some scrubby trees. They were ripping through our memories. And they were just getting started. I didn't want to be that guy, the one ranting on Facebook, waving legal papers around, or yelling at teenagers in reflective vests. I really didn't. I just wanted to talk to someone, just get a straight answer, maybe sit down like adults and figure out what the hell was going on. So I started simple. I went to the next HOA board meeting, or at least I tried to. The notice was posted last minute, literally the night before, taped to the back of the neighborhood pool gate where no one would see it unless they were out hunting frogs with a flashlight. I only found out because Gina texted me. The meeting was at the clubhouse. I showed up, brought a printed copy of that newsletter blurb and the laminated sign they'd nailed to our pine. The room wasn't even full. A few chairs, a folding table, Chuck at the center like he was presiding over a trial. I raised my hand to speak and was told the open comment period had ended 5 minutes earlier. That was it. That was my window. I stood there anyway. I held up the sign and said, "Can someone explain to me how a public trail is being built on private HOA land without a vote from homeowners?" Chuck didn't even look at me. He kept his eyes on his laptop and said, "We followed procedure." "What procedure?" I asked. "There was no notice, no public hearing. You didn't even send an email." One of the other board members, a guy named Carl, who always looks like he just woke up from a nap, mumbled something about authorized use under municipal collaboration. And Chuck, he finally looked up and said, "Mr. Colburn, this project benefits the entire community. If you have legal concerns, take it up with the village." Then they moved on. Next agenda item, new pool umbrellas. I walked out of that room shaking, not from anger, from disbelief. It was like arguing with mannequins. You could scream into their faces and they'd still go on about umbrellas and fertilizer budgets. So I did what Chuck suggested. I took it up with the village. I called the planning department, left a message. A week later, someone named Cassandra called me back. She was polite enough until I asked for a copy of the easement agreement. Then her tone shifted. She said the village was working in good faith with the HOA and that residents concerned with specific lot encroachments should address the HOA directly. It was a perfect loop. The HOA said, "Talk to the village." The village said, "Talk to the HOA." And around we went. I started reading. Everything. I dug out our HOA covenants, the massive binder they gave us when we moved in that I hadn't looked at since we painted the living room. I read every page, every clause, every footnote. Lisa would fall asleep on the couch while I sat at the kitchen table with a highlighter in one hand and a beer in the other, muttering to myself like some madman prepping for court. And there it was. Section 4.2. No portion of the common area shall be sold, transferred, or repurposed for public use without a vote of the homeowners, meeting quorum as defined in Article 7. Plain as day. I scanned the page, emailed it to the board, attached a screenshot of the trail map, and asked once again for a copy of the easement they claimed to have approved. This time, I didn't even get an auto reply. I tried talking to neighbors, going door to door like some political candidate. Most of them were sympathetic. A few had no idea what was going on. One guy told me I should stop being dramatic and that a little trail won't kill anybody. I asked if he'd feel the same way if it ran 10 feet from his daughter's window. He didn't answer. I printed flyers and taped them to mailboxes, urging people to attend the next meeting and ask questions. Half were torn down by the next morning. Lisa caught a guy doing it and asked him why. He said Chuck told him it was unauthorized posting on our own mailboxes. Then there was the pettiness. Oh man, the petty stuff came fast. We got a notice for faded trim paint on our garage, another one about weeds visible through the fence slats. Cooper barked at a squirrel once and someone filed a noise complaint. Lisa's smile got thinner by the day. Emma stopped sketching altogether. She started sleeping with white noise in her earbuds, trying to drown out the sound of strangers walking through the brush behind her window. And I started to doubt myself. I mean, what was I doing? Spending late nights flipping through bylaws, arguing with people who already made up their minds, chasing signatures, writing emails no one read. I'm an electrician, not a damn lawyer. I fix things with wires, not loopholes and leverage. There was one night, after another ignored email, another unanswered call, when I sat out in the backyard with Cooper lying next to me, and I genuinely thought about giving up. Just letting it go. Letting them build their stupid trail and move on. And maybe if it hadn't been for Emma, I would have. But I looked up at that swing, swaying in the dark like a ghost, and I remembered the way her laugh used to sound echoing off those trees. That was ours. Not Chuck's. Not the village's. Ours. And I wasn't going down without a fight. Not yet. I was sitting in my truck outside the hardware store, half listening to some podcast I didn't care about, when I saw Gina's name pop up on my phone. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. Last time we talked, she sounded worn out, like the whole fight had sucked the wind out of her too. I figured she'd tapped out like a lot of folks had, but this time she didn't waste a second on small talk. I need to show you something, she said. Her voice was low, clipped. Tonight, no texting, no emailing, just come over. That's not the kind of invite you ignore. I swung by her place after dinner. Lisa didn't like the sound of it, but she didn't stop me, just said, "Be careful," and gave me that look wives give when they know more than they're saying. Emma barely looked up from her sketch pad, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. That was the first time in a while she'd even picked up a pencil. Gina's house was dark, all the curtains drawn. She let me in without a word and walked straight to the dining table where her old laptop sat open next to a pile of manila folders. "I shouldn't have these," she said, pointing to the folders, "but I kept backups, just in case." She sat down and opened one of them, sliding it toward me like she was handing over evidence in a crime drama. The first page was an email from Chuck, sent to the village planning liaison, some guy named Burke. The subject line was Marvin Greenway Project Coordination. The email was short, but it made my jaw clench. "We'll handle the board side. Residents don't need to be involved until the tape's already down. Less noise that way." I read it twice, then 3 more times. "That's gotta be, 3 months ago?" I asked. 4, Gina said. Right after the private board meeting they claimed was just about landscaping budgets. She pulled out another folder, this one thinner, just a few pages. It was a draft of an easement agreement. Not signed, not finalized, but very real, and dated before the supposed board vote. They had it lined up already, she said. The vote was theater. I felt heat rising up my neck. My hands were actually shaking. Not from anger, not yet, just pure disbelief. "And it gets worse," she added. She reached for a flash drive and plugged it into her laptop. On the screen came up a spreadsheet, budget line items from the HOA's general fund. She scrolled down to a section marked Consulting Fees. One entry stood out. Martech Solutions, $2,800. "What the hell is Martech?" I asked. "That's the thing. It doesn't exist," Gina said. At least not in the Secretary of State's database. I searched, multiple times, nothing. No tax ID, no contact info. Chuck claimed it was the firm that handled our land use analysis. "I think it's a shell." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There was one more thing. Gina leaned in and opened her email inbox. She had a forwarded message from another former board member who had been quietly following the fallout. It was an internal memo Chuck had sent to the remaining board members, pressuring them to accelerate the easement finalization before momentum is lost. "Momentum," I said. "He talks about this like it's a PR campaign." "It is," she said. "He's already eyeing a run for town council. He wanted this trail to be his big move." I sat back in the chair and rubbed my face. It all suddenly made too much sense. The way they stonewalled, the fake meetings, the timing, the caution tape appearing overnight like weeds, the gaslighting, the fake consultant, the missing vote. It wasn't just shady, it was illegal. What do I do with this? I asked her. I don't know, she said. But you've got something now, something real, something that can hurt them. I drove home in silence, the folders on my passenger seat like a loaded weapon. Lisa met me at the door. I didn't say anything, just handed her the stack. She sat down and flipped through the papers, slow and deliberate, like she was reading a verdict. When she looked up, her eyes weren't tired anymore. They were sharp. They screwed with the wrong yard, she said. She was right. Up until that night, I'd been swinging in the dark, guessing, reacting, hoping someone would throw me a rope. But now, I had a damn torch. And Chuck Merriweather was standing in a house soaked in gasoline. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, running through every conversation I'd had with Chuck, every passive-aggressive email from the HOA, every time I bit my tongue, thinking maybe I was overreacting. And now, knowing what I knew, every one of those moments played back like a warning I'd ignored. By sunrise, I was done being passive. I went straight to the kitchen, fired up my laptop, and started digging. Gina's documents weren't just damning, they were detailed. They had dates, names, email headers, drafts of contracts, and that phantom company name, Martech Solutions, that I couldn't find in any public database. Not in North Carolina, not anywhere. I even checked Delaware, just in case Chuck thought he was clever. Lisa brought me coffee without a word and just sat across from me, watching. She knew I was somewhere else entirely, focused in a way I hadn't been in months. I pulled up the HOA bylaws again, this time with red pen in hand like I was grading a term paper. I reread that clause about common areas and public use so many times I could have quoted it in my sleep. Then I started putting together a timeline. Emails, board meetings, survey markings, laminated signs, everything. Each time something had happened, I made a note of who knew what and when. I started a spreadsheet. It was messy. My desk looked like a conspiracy board by lunchtime. Sticky notes, printed emails, screenshots of the HOA site, and a copy of the HOA financial statement I'd finally requested through a certified letter 2 months back, another thing they'd tried to delay until it slipped my mind. But they didn't count on how stubborn I could be when something didn't sit right. Then I remembered Ava. A few years back, I'd fixed a panel in her garage. She was one of those clients who actually made conversation while I worked, told me about her job, real estate litigation, mostly HOA stuff. I dug through old invoices until I found her number. I texted, "Hey Ava, this is Matt Colburn. I did some work on your garage a while back. Got a situation, yucky my HOA. I think you'll want to hear. Got receipts, real ones." She replied 10 minutes later. "Meet me at my office tomorrow. Bring everything." Lisa offered to come with me, but I told her to stay with Emma. Our daughter had started sketching again, just a little. Some wildflowers and trees. One of them looked like the pine in our yard, but bent and cracked in the middle. I kissed the top of her head before I left and told her I was handling it. Ava's office was no frills. She had a framed diploma, a whiteboard with legal deadlines, and a Keurig that made the place smell like hazelnut. She sat down across from me in jeans and a hoodie, no pretense, no small talk. Just, show me. I laid everything out. Gina's folders, the emails, the fake consulting firm, the maps, the bylaws, the quote about residents don't need to be involved, all of it. I watched her read in total silence, jaw tightening just slightly the further she went. When she finished, she closed the folder, leaned back, and said, "This isn't just shady, it's actionable, possibly criminal." I exhaled for the first time all day. "What do we do?" I asked. She leaned forward, clicked her pen, and started scribbling. First, she said, we'd file a demand letter to both the HOA and the village, citing breach of covenant and unauthorized easement execution. That would freeze the project temporarily. Then we'd file a petition to compel document discovery, including internal board emails and financials, something Chuck definitely wouldn't want public. And if that didn't work, injunction, court order, take it all the way. "But that's not what'll hurt them most," she said. "What will?" "Sunlight." And just like that, we were planning a public campaign to shine that sunlight. Ava connected me with a contact she had in local media, a guy named Jake Elwell, investigative reporter for a small but punchy news outlet. Jake loved HOA corruption stories like a hound loves a scent trail. When I told him I had documents and a witness, he scheduled a video interview the next day. I looped Gina in. She was nervous but ready, said she'd been waiting for someone to stand beside her before going public. I told her I had no plans to stand beside her. I was standing in front. She laughed for the first time in weeks. Jake's team came out and filmed footage of the backyard, the flags, the swing, the laminated sign still nailed to the pine. They interviewed me in my garage, where the walls were covered in wiring diagrams and tool racks. "You mind if we show the swing?" he asked. I said, please do. Lisa made a Facebook group, Our Backyard, Not Their Shortcut, and people joined faster than we expected. Dozens, then over 100. Neighbors started sending me their own HOA letters. Some had been fined for non-conforming lawn decor, others for letting their trash bins sit too long at the curb. It wasn't about the trail anymore, it was about control. We weren't just mad, we were organized. I set up a town hall meeting, our own, not the HOA's. Rented out the community center. Ava spoke about legal rights, Gina told her story, Jake previewed the segment. We streamed it online and got more than 1,000 views in the first day. One of the clips, me holding up the fake consulting invoice, made it onto local Reddit and caught fire. And through it all, Chuck stayed quiet. No statements, no rebuttals, just silence. Which honestly scared me more than if he'd lawyered up right away. It meant he was calculating. But that was fine, because this time, so was I. The plan wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was real. And for the first time since those pink flags went in the ground, I felt like I wasn't standing on sinking sand anymore. I had the truth, and I had people willing to stand with me. The rest was just execution. I remember the exact moment things started moving. Not in theory, not on paper, really moving. It was when Jake Elwell's story dropped. The video opened with a wide shot of our backyard, Emma's swing swaying in the breeze, the laminated easement area sign nailed to the pine, and Cooper sniffing one of those faded caution tape flags like it didn't belong there. Then it cut to me standing in the garage in front of my workbench, holding up that spreadsheet with the fake consulting firm circled in red. Jake didn't hold back. He laid out the whole timeline. The unauthorized easement, the staged vote, the shady payments, and Chuck's emails about keeping residents out until tape's already down. Gina gave a quiet but clear interview from her dining room, and Ava explained the legal violations in plain English. There wasn't a single second of that segment that felt exaggerated, just facts, and how those facts made you feel sick to your stomach. Within 2 days, it had close to 100,000 views on Facebook alone, and that's when everything shifted. Emails poured in. Neighbors I'd never met suddenly wanted to talk. Some were furious, others embarrassed that they hadn't asked more questions earlier. A few board members tried to distance themselves from Chuck, claiming they weren't fully informed. Lisa and I took turns answering DMs and sorting comments in the Facebook group, which had ballooned to over 1,000 members. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. People were lined up out the door and into the parking lot. For the first time ever, Chuck didn't show up. Instead, some vice president I'd never even heard speak before got up there and read a statement that sounded like it had been written by a lawyer trying to walk a tightrope over lava. The board remains committed to transparency and welcomes community input. Blah, blah, blah. I raised my hand, didn't wait to be called on. Where's Chuck? I asked. The guy flinched. Unavailable tonight. I laughed, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Ava filed the injunction that week. It was a solid move. Put the easement on legal pause, forced them to submit all communications and records related to the trail and the consulting firm. We requested discovery on the entire HOA voting process for the past year. They responded with a threat. An actual letter from a big downtown law firm accusing us of defamation, harassment, and malicious interference with community operations. They called me the central agitator and said further actions could result in legal penalties. I brought it straight to Ava. She smiled and said, "Good, that means they're sweating." But it still hit me hard. It's one thing to fight with neighbors, it's another to get a letter like that, with letterhead and case numbers and words like tortillas. I had to sit down after reading it. Lisa poured me a bourbon without a word and just sat next to me while Cooper curled up at my feet like he knew I needed the pressure of his weight on my toes to remind me I was still grounded. I won't lie, part of me thought about walking away. Chuck was gone, the project was paused, the community had rallied, maybe that was enough. But then I saw the reply from the village. They sent a bland little email confirming the trail plan was still active pending legal resolution, and that community impact remains a key consideration moving forward. Which is politician speak, for we're still trying to push it through, we're just being quiet about it now. That's when I realized this wasn't over, not even close, so we pushed harder. I filed a public records request on the village's communication with Chuck and the HOA. Took days of back and forth, but when we finally got the data, jackpot. There were emails from the village planner talking about expedited processes and assuming HOA authority was secured months before any vote took place. Chuck even CC'd his personal Gmail on some of them. Amateur move. We compiled everything, emails, spreadsheets, photos of the fake survey flags, even testimony from neighbors who'd never received notice about the easement. Ava bundled it into a formal complaint to the state attorney general's office. Meanwhile, the HOA tried to rally. They sent out a glossy mailer, paid for with our dues by the way, calling the trail project a vision of future connectivity and saying a small but vocal group was spreading misinformation. They plastered it with stock photos of smiling joggers and happy kids on scooters. Lisa held it up to the light and said, "Wow, white people jogging in every picture. Real subtle, Chuck." Emma laughed from the couch for the first time in weeks. We weren't just pushing back anymore. We were dismantling the illusion. The final straw came from a woman named Linda, 2 blocks over. She'd been silent through all of this. I barely knew her. One afternoon, she showed up at my door with a folder and said, "You're the one fighting, right?" I nodded. Inside her folder were minutes from a meeting 2 years ago, before Chuck took over. In those notes, there was a line where the board had explicitly rejected a proposal to allow public access through common areas, citing the exact same clause I'd highlighted months ago. We had them, not just on shady dealings, on direct violation of their own precedent. That night, I sat in the backyard with Lisa and Emma. We built a little fire in the pit. Cooper snored at my feet, his paws twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. Emma showed me her sketchbook. She'd drawn a new version of the swing, this time with bright summer leaves and Cooper lying underneath it. The trail flags were still there, flapping quietly in the dark. But they didn't scare me anymore. We had the truth, the law, and the town's attention. And Chuck had a bonfire coming. We didn't know the fire was going to catch the way it did. I mean, we hoped. But when you're in the middle of it, just trying to hold your ground, you don't think about momentum. You're too busy bracing for whatever comes next. It started with the second segment Jake ran. This one was sharper, less background, more blood. It opened with a tight shot of Chuck at a ribbon cutting from a year ago, grinning like a politician with something to prove. Then it cut to Ava holding up the actual HOA covenants, reading the section about common property and public use, right into the camera. Then Gina, straight to the point. They lied. They made a decision on our behalf, behind our backs, with our money. They showed the Martech consulting firm with an overlay graphic pointing out the missing registration, missing tax ID, missing everything. They even showed the check, $22,000 drawn from the HOA's general fund, with Chuck's signature on it. That part hit hard. People saw his name in ink, next to a payment to a ghost company. No room for interpretation. No PR spin. By the next morning, the HOA Facebook group was a battlefield. Half the neighborhood was demanding an emergency meeting. The other half was trying to pretend they'd always had doubts. Even Carl, the board member who once tried to fine me for visible extension cords, suddenly wanted to talk. The real explosion came when a local radio station picked up the story, then the Charlotte News. Then a regional paper ran it with the headline, "Trail of Deceit, How One HOA President Went Rogue." After that, Chuck vanished. No one saw him for days. No walks, no updates, no motivational emails about community values. Just silence. Until the emergency meeting. That night felt like something out of a movie. The community center was packed, standing room only, hallway full, even a few people sitting on windowsills. Ava came with me, holding a folder thick with printouts. Lisa and Emma sat near the back, but I could feel Lisa's presence like a force field behind me. Gina stood by the projector, ready to pull the trigger. The meeting opened with nervous faces, 3 board members sitting at a folding table, trying not to look at each other. Chuck's seat was empty. The treasurer cleared her throat and said, "Due to recent developments, we feel it's important to allow time for community questions." She didn't even finish the sentence before people started raising hands, yelling, shouting over one another. A guy in a flannel jacket stood up and said, "Where's the money, huh? Where's our 22 grand?" A woman near the back yelled, "I want a refund on every single fine I ever got from these people." That's when Gina stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. She plugged in her laptop, pulled up the spreadsheet, and started walking the room through it. The email from Chuck, the ghost firm, the violation of the bylaw, the fake vote, the laminated signs posted without consent, the buried meeting minutes from 2 years ago showing the board had previously rejected the idea of a public trail through HOA land. She didn't editorialize. She didn't rant. She just showed. One by one, people fell silent. There's something powerful about watching a room full of grown adults realize, at the same time, that they've been played. Then Ava took the mic. She explained what was happening legally, how the easement had been frozen, how discovery was underway, how the board's actions had not only breached their own covenants but may have crossed into criminal territory. She dropped the bomb about the AG complaint and said, "Clear as day. If this doesn't get cleaned up by you, it'll get cleaned up by the state." Dead silence, and then someone stood up and said, "I motion to remove the current board." Just like that, it was real. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on the board members' faces. Not anger, not outrage. Just this slow, sinking expression, like they were finally understanding that no amount of status or condescension was going to dig them out of this. Votes were cast on the spot. Emergency rules allowed for it due to quorum. Chuck wasn't just removed. He was barred from holding any future board position in the HOA. Gina was voted onto the board. So was I. When the dust settled, I stepped outside for air. Lisa followed me out. I felt like I'd just run a marathon underwater. I hadn't even noticed how tightly I'd been clenching my fists until she grabbed one and uncurled my fingers. "You did it," she said, soft. Emma came out a few minutes later. She didn't say anything, just handed me her sketch pad. There was a new drawing on the page, the swing, under the trees, lit by string lights. No flags, no caution tape, just calm. "I want to help you hang those lights this weekend," she said. I choked back whatever emotion wanted to come out, nodded, and said, "Yeah, we'll do that." I didn't feel like I'd won, not yet, but I knew Chuck had lost. And sometimes that's where winning begins. It's quiet again, not just in the way it used to be with birds and wind and Cooper's tail thumping lazily against the porch rail, but quiet in that deeper, deeper way. The kind of quiet where you stop checking your email every 5 minutes waiting for bad news. The kind of quiet where you finally unclench your jaw without realizing you'd been grinding your teeth for 6 months straight. The laminated sign is gone. So are the stakes, the flags, the tape, and the heavy feeling that someone was standing just outside your fence line with a clipboard, waiting to take something from you. We ended up hanging the string lights, me and Emma, just like she asked. She picked these warm Edison bulbs, the kind that make everything look golden and a little nostalgic. We wrapped them around the 2 pines, right above the old swing. Cooper sat in the grass while we worked, occasionally barking at nothing in particular, just to remind the squirrels he was still retired, not dead. That same night, we lit a fire in the pit and sat around it with mugs of cider. Lisa put on some old folk playlists she used to play when we first moved here. Emma didn't even flinch when she heard twigs cracking in the trees. She just pulled her hoodie tighter and kept sketching in her lap. The swing creaked every now and then. Same sound as before, but now it didn't feel like a threat. Just part of the soundtrack. I think back on all of it sometimes, not constantly, but enough. The late nights at the kitchen table with bylaws and spreadsheets, the pit in my stomach when those letters came, the moment I almost quit, the second I didn't, and everything that happened after. Funny how a fight like that can stretch you thin, then somehow build you back stronger in places you didn't even know were weak. We rebuilt the HOA board from the ground up. Gina took over as president, and no, she didn't want the job, but she's good at it, fair, transparent. We made the minutes public, overhauled the voting rules, banned closed-door decisions, and put in a new policy. No structural changes to common property without a full neighborhood vote. Period. Chuck, he sold his house and moved. Rumor is he's trying to get on some planning board in another county. If he's smart, he'll stay quiet. If not, well, people talk. And the internet doesn't forget. As for me, I didn't set out to become anything. Not a whistleblower, not a reformer, not some HOA hero. I just wanted to keep my yard from turning into a shortcut. But somewhere along the way, I realized it was never just about the trail. It was about the principle, the line you draw, the one you don't let anyone step over, even when they come wearing a suit and carrying a clipboard and telling you it's already been decided. I still do electrical work, still get grease on my hands, still fight with rusted breaker boxes and swear under my breath when a GFCI won't reset. But now when I drive through our neighborhood, I see things differently. Not like a guy who bought a house, like someone who defended one. And yeah, sometimes I walk out to the edge of our yard, where those flags once fluttered. I stand between the 2 pines, look up at the lights we hung, and think, this is what winning feels like. Not parades, not applause, just peace, just presence, just knowing you didn't back down when it counted. Lisa once asked me if I regret any of it, if I wish I'd just let the trail come through and saved myself the trouble. I told her no, because I got my yard back. I got my family back. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, I found my voice. Turns out it was louder than I thought.